Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Anne Wawadu. Russia unleashed a fresh volley of missiles in Ukraine overnight in a city in the east, killing 2 people, setting off huge blazes and damaging dozens of homes and other buildings. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the 2 deaths in his nightly video address, vowing that the Russian occupiers will receive answers for every such strike. Mr. Zelensky also said a 14-year-old boy was killed near his school when it was hit by a bomb in the Chernihiv region close to the Russian border.
Лише ось один приклад сьогодні. Чернігівщина.
Pavlograd, the Derails region, the terrorist missiles claimed the lives of 2 very young men. My condolences go out to the families. 40 others, women, children and men, received aid after having suffered wounds and injuries.
14 років дитині. Він просто був неподалік школи.
Meanwhile, officials in the Pavlograd area say that 34 people have been wounded and dozens of homes damaged overnight in Russian airstrikes. According to the Ukrainian military, in the Pavlograd district, 80 private residential buildings, 9 schools and 5 shops were all affected. Officials add that a missile attack in the region overnight damaged 24 high-rise buildings. The attack in the Pavlograd, a city and railway hub, comes during the second wave of nationwide missile strikes in 3 days, with Moscow apparently reviving its winter tactic of long-range strikes ahead of a planned Ukrainian counter-offensive. In the meantime, the regional administration of Kherson said the Russian forces attacked the city 8 times with 41 shells over the past 24 hours. The administration said on Telegram that Russian forces targeted the building of the state institution. Residential areas were also hit by the shelling. As a result of this, 1 person died and 3 were wounded, including 1 child. An explosion in the Russian Berdyansk region bordering Ukraine has derailed a freight train. Russian railway operators said the incident happened at around 10:17 a.m. Moscow time. It said the locomotive and 7 freight wagons were derailed and the locomotive caught fire. Berdyansk Governor Alexander Bogomaz said that on his Telegram channel. He said an unidentified explosive device went off at about 136-kilometer mark on the Berdyansk-Unecha railway line. Russian authorities are saying that the region has seen multiple attacks by pro-Ukrainian sabotage groups, including the shelling of a village over the weekend, which killed 4 civilians. Kiev's top general said that Ukraine destroyed Russia's army's most combat-capable units in Bakhmut. Colonel General Alexander Syrsky said that Ukraine's commander of ground forces said, and I quote, "We continue, despite all the forecast and advice, to hold Bakhmut. We gave an opportunity for our reserves to prepare, and we are preparing for further actions ourselves." The 10-month-long battle for the eastern Ukrainian city has taken on a symbolic importance for both sides. It has now become the fulcrum of a war that has seen very little shift in front lines since late 2022, leaving both sides looking for a breakthrough. Just on Monday, Syrsky said that the Ukrainian units has ousted Russian forces from some positions in Bakhmut and fierce battles, while Russian Wagner Group, on the other hand, said that his units incrementally advanced in the Bakhmut region. A former Marine copper, Harris Andrews, has been killed on the outskirts of Bakhmut last week, and that's according to his mother, Willow Andrews, and colleagues in Ukraine. 26-year-old Andrews from Cleveland, Ohio, was hit by a mortar, likely on April the 19th, and the so-called Road of Life, a rare access road into Bakhmut used by the Ukrainian military to resupply their forces and evacuate civilians. His mother said his body has yet to be recovered due to the ongoing fighting around Bakhmut. Andrews worked for an activist group known as the Resistance Committee. According to its social media statement, the group said he was killed assisting the evacuation of civilians from the city. Andrews left Cleveland, Ohio in November and joined the Foreign Legion in Ukraine, a group of foreign fighters helping the Ukrainian military. According to his mother, his contract ended in March and he decided to stay there. Russian news agency TASS says a drone was shot down in the west of Crimea. The Russian head of the public, Sergei Askonov, said in a post that a UAV was shot down by air defense forces in the west of Crimea. In his words, the servicemen solved tasks clearly and effectively and asked everyone to remain calm and trust only trusted sources of information. The head of the Wagner private militia renewed his appeal to Russia's defense ministry to increase ammunition shipments to his fighters trying to seize the city of Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine. Yevgeny Prigozhin has frequently clashed with Moscow's defense establishment over the conduct of Russia's campaign in Ukraine and what he says is insufficient support being provided to his Wagner soldiers. In a video posted on his Telegram channel, Prigozhin said that he needs at least 300 tons of artillery shells a day for the assault. Bakhmut, which had a pre-war population of about 70,000, has now been leveled by months of artillery shelling and urban combat between Russia and Ukrainian soldiers. Prigozhin also claimed on April the 11th that his forces, which are now leading the assault, controlled more than 80% of the city. Wagner is not part of Russia's official armed forces, and Prigozhin has previously accused the defense ministry of betraying his fighters and Russia's overall war aims by not providing sufficient ammunition. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has said that Russia was inflicting heavy blows to Ukraine across the entire front line, but that the supply of weapons was crucial to ensuring the success of what Moscow calls its special military operation. In a meeting with Russia's top military officials, Mr. Shoigu said the Russian forces were engaged in combat operations along the entire line of contact, and they were fighting not only Ukraine, but also unprecedented military assistance from the West. However, he said that Russia has successfully attacked Ukrainian depots storing Western-supplied weapons. He adds that Moscow had taken steps to boost its arms production to support the war, and he also said the Russian forces' success on the battlefield would largely depend on the timely replenishment of weapons and other military equipment. Russia has in recent days killed and injured dozens of people in its largest strikes on Ukraine for weeks. Let's bring in VOA Anna Chernikova to join me now from Kiev to talk more about the war going on in Ukraine. Hello, Anna, and thank you for joining us on The World Today.
Good evening.
Let's begin with the latest airstrike in Ukraine by Russia. What more can you tell us apart from what we know now?
Unfortunately, we can see that Russian forces have changed slightly their tactics, and now this massive shelling are happening over the night, deep night. So they start at around 4 o'clock in the morning when people are at their homes sleeping in their beds. And these two last massive airstrikes were quite serious and caused a lot of casualties, especially we're talking about the city of Uman and Dnipropetrovsk region. But also, except of this night attacks, there are additional areas which are suffering the most in these current weeks from Russian attacks, which is Dnipropetrovsk region and particularly Pavlograd area. And the latest attack happened in Pavlograd, which is Dnipropetrovsk region, and which is quite close to the it's closer, let's put it this way, its location is closer to Russian positions than the city of Dnipro itself or the rest of Dnipropetrovsk region. And unfortunately, people are suffering there for these past days and weeks and months, but particularly this last week, unfortunately, as we already heard, and I can confirm this information, so there is no additional numbers available yet, but over 100 of the civilian buildings, both private sector and residential areas, were damaged quite badly. badly. So some areas and some buildings damaged more, some less. But in general, situation is quite. Well, it's quite serious, and the damages are very serious. And also people died. Unfortunately, children also died. And this is something which is happening, and not only in Pavlohrad region, Dnipropetrovsk region, but also Kherson region, which is at the artillery distance for Russian forces, and the city of Kherson itself. And we're hearing a lot of reports from there as well. And also, as President Zelensky mentioned in his latest speech, and we also hear reports every day that those areas in the north part of the country, such as Sumy region and Chernihiv region, which are bordering Russia, they are also suffering the attacks because of their close position to the Russian forces on the territory of Russia. And similar situation is in Kharkiv region, and there are a lot of reports on the attacks as well.
And how are regional administrators reacting to these strikes? What are their immediate responses to it?
Well, first of all, and the priority are people, of course, and this is something that, so if any airstrike happens, the first thing for the authorities to make sure that people are not under the rubble, and people are not, and there are no casualties, and there are no people injured. If in case there are people under the rubble injured and possibly killed, the first thing is to save people. So not only physically but also mentally. So the first thing to do is to provide this physical and mental help to people. Second thing would be to make sure that these people have a place to stay after they lost their homes, and to allocate them to safer places. In some regions which are very close to the front line, the most immediate response now is to evacuate people. But in general, the main priority goes to people, and afterwards, of course, the main task for the authorities to find out what was the exact reason of this. Of the tragedy, so which weapon was used, and to provide this information for investigation, to collect all the evidence, because when we're talking about residential areas and civilians attacked, this is a war crime, and this is under Geneva Convention. So this is very important, and of course, rebuilding, repairing, and again, bringing back life to these areas, but in some areas, unfortunately, for the moment, it's not possible. If we are talking about Donetsk region, which is at the front line, some areas are just dead areas, and it's really difficult to. So here, the most important would be to evacuate children, evacuate people, civilians from the areas. But in other parts of the country, it would be to bring the life back.
But how much of a difference does it make with Western tanks? I mean, how much difference do Western tanks make in the Ukrainian counteroffensive? Is there any major difference?
Well, we don't yet have official reports on that, because we only know that, and it was confirmed by the Ukrainian officials and military, that some tanks are already coming to their locations and are already participating in the battles. But again, we do not have any information provided in terms of how successful they are, and in which direction they operate, and so on and so forth, because this is something that Ukrainian authorities do not disclose. But in general, if we look at the areas that apparently we consider as the main priority for the counteroffensive, such as south and eastern part of the country, we hear time to time that Ukrainian forces had certain advances, or Ukrainian forces managed to keep the front line without changes, and this could also means that tanks or any other equipment provided by the allies and by the European and U.S. Support packages aid is working. But again, for the moment, I cannot give an exact answer in terms of tanks or particularly equipment provided for this counteroffensive, the latest equipment, because this is under the secret note, and unfortunately, we do not have such information from the official sources.
And if we recall, Pope Francis actually said the Vatican is involved in a secret peace mission in Ukraine. But how much of an influence do you think the Vatican or countries like Brazil, China, and even France can have in proposing a peace formula, or what we can call a settlement?
Well, there are two sides of the coin here because, for instance, if we talk about Vatican initiative, Ukrainian officials said they cannot comment on that because they don't have enough information about that, and we do not have additional confirmation, or we cannot independently confirm and check if how it is going, if it is going. I mean, we know from Vatican that this is something going on, but again, it's difficult to comment on that considering that not enough information is provided. But in general, if we look at it, and this is the other side of the coin, more sides and more countries and more institutions are involved, should be better in general for establishing peace. But again, this is something that it's important to remember that there are two main sides of this war, which is Ukraine and Russia. And only these two countries at the end will be able to finally sit down for the negotiation. But of course, this would be done in support of the rest of the world, and any country involved would play a very important role, and more countries involved could possibly make this process faster. But again, for the moment, as we already discussed a lot of times, and it is discussed on the international arena. Unfortunately, Russia is not showing signs of going towards the negotiations, at least considering the actions by Russia, not the words by Russia. And for Ukraine, for the moment, the most important negotiation is happening at the battlefield, and this is also not a secret because this is exactly what Ukrainian officials are saying, and Ukrainian officials and military are trying to make sure that before any negotiation began, Ukraine has certain position at the battlefield, because this would help and this would basically establish let's say the position at the negotiation table. So it's really, really difficult for the moment to give just an answer, a simple and direct answer to that, but definitely more countries involved and more countries demonstrate their position and talk about this better, because this is something that this war is not only about Ukraine. It's about Europe, about European region, and about the whole world, and the rule of law in general.
Now, Anna, how much of a psychological effect does this conflict have on children? We heard President Zelensky there talking about the death of a child in the latest strike. Are they aware, especially the ones in Ukraine, are they aware that the country is in full-blown war with Russia? What are the messages being passed to them?
Well, unfortunately, we see that currently, a war generation is growing. And of course, children who starting from age 3 or even 2, when they start to realize that either they don't have home to stay in, or they have to move somewhere to evacuate, or they have to go away with their mother and they don't see their father. So all these things, of course, affect them mentally, And I can say that a lot of children in Ukraine now, even if they remain in the country with their families, they have a chance to communicate with their parents, and even if they stay at home, of course, they know that war is happening. And the message which is around that in schools, in kindergartens, at homes, children are told that, well, the war is happening, and this is something that which is bad, but this is something that should end at one point, and the army is doing their best to end this. But so this kind of things. But what is definitely clear is the message which is clear, that children know that the war is happening, and children know that that there is an aggression side, and there is something that. And people are dying in general. So and of course this affects their mental health, and it's very important that in schools and kindergartens there are experts who work with people, with children, also to make sure that this trauma is not getting too deep, because definitely some children are more affected, some children are less affected, but in general, all children are considered in Ukraine as war generation.
But before I let you go, Anna, I'm just curious. I mean, what's an everyday life in Ukraine without strikes, without missiles, without the air raid sirens sounding in the ears of people?
People are trying to keep going in general. So people are trying to continue to work, continue to do their daily stuff, continue to get pregnant, to give birth. There are a lot of pregnant women in Ukraine currently, and of course the number is probably not that huge as it or that big that was previous years, but is not that small considering that war is still ongoing, and considering that of course last year was extremely extreme. Sorry for this so similar words putting together, but it was really extreme for everyone. So people are trying to live their lives as much as it's possible. Of course, those areas, such areas as Kyiv or central part of Ukraine or south parts, which are less affected by the combat itself, and east parts as well, which are not that close to the front line, or which are not at the front line, and of course western part of the country. This parts, more or less, businesses continue to operate. Of course, environment changed, circumstances changed, possibilities changed, and a lot of businesses lost money and had to reshape. But country is trying to live on. Of course, this is something which is not possible in the areas which are at the front line. But even those areas, for example, if we are taking Izium city in the Kharkiv region, which was under occupation for half a year and was almost 80%, 90% of the city was destroyed. Even the city, I had a chance to talk to people from there. The city is trying to come back. So, hospitals are getting back to work, grocery stores, people rebuilding their houses, government rebuilding also a lot of stuff. So I would say that people are trying to live their lives and trying to make sure that when the war ends, they do not have to start from scratch, but they already have certain, processes established.
All right. Thank you very much, VOA Anna Chernikova, for your time and your contributions always on The World Today. And please stay safe.
Thank you.